Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. What makes a friendship special among women? That question is at the center of Nancy K. Miller's new book. In it, she explores three of the most important friendships of her life as an academic, writer, and feminist. Sadly, she has lost all three of them, one to suicide, one to a cerebral hemorrhage, and one to cancer. And the dimensions of those losses and her gratitude for those special friendships are what she reflects upon in this book about three extraordinary women. My Brilliant Friends, Our Lives in Feminism is part of the Gender and Culture series published by Columbia University Press. Welcome.
Thank you, Sheryl.
So why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I was feeling very lonely. It was a very shocking experience to lose three friends in 7 years. That was the millennium. And it was just, I suddenly realized that how much they had shaped my life, and that there was no way to imagine a replacement for any of them. And I began to want to revisit our friendships and and I had different motivations. The first person I wanted to write about was Carolyn Heilbrun, because she had committed suicide, and I felt I was very angry with her for having done that, and in a way I was trying to reconstruct our friendship and try to understand what had happened. And so there were different emotions involved in these losses. So I wanted to originally just write something rather personal for myself to try to get at these friendships. But ultimately, I began to think I had to think about what friendship was. What were these friendships? What made them particular? And some of it had to do with feminism, or a lot of it had to do with feminism, I really would have to say. The earliest friendship that I described with Naomi Schor began in 1970 at Columbia. And that was a very important year. That was the year that Kate Millett published Sexual Politics. So we were very, very aware of feminism and what it could mean for the academy, what it could mean for our work, what it could mean for our lives and for other women. And that context was something I wanted to evoke, what we experienced as feminists, as we created a consciousness raising group. We began to look at women writers. It was a whole moment of transformation.
So, I'm going to a college reunion next month. I'm not going to say which reunion it was. They're significant. They're all significant now.
Oh, you didn't want to say the number?
No. And one reason, I didn't go back for many years. And then I started going, last 15 years or so, 15, 20, I started going to all of my class reunions because it occurred to me that the people who we knew when we were young, the people we knew, the people who knew us, were very important in our lives because they know our history in a way nobody else does.
Right.
And so I'll be going back for that. But tell me about Carolyn, how do you pronounce her last name?
Heilbrun.
Heilbrun, whom you met at Columbia.
Yes. I met her, she was a friend, and she was also a mentor. And when I met her, she was a tenured professor. She was very well known. She had written many books. She was famous. She was powerful. And I was a very junior assistant professor. And hierarchy is everything, as you know, in academia, especially at Columbia. But she kind of chose me. She was looking for feminist friendship, in fact, and she became my guide, in a way, through the years at Columbia. But she also had very specific ideas about friendship. And she thought the most important thing, this is not really original or a surprise, but was talking. And so she set up, she said, well, if we're going to be friends, we must meet every week. Now, I was a little taken aback since I barely knew this person, but we started having weekly dinners. And this tradition lasted until her death. So that was a really particular structure. We also taught together and created the Gender and Culture series together. So she was in the position of the mentor, but she never really wanted to call herself the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
She just wanted to be the friend.
You say she had all the things that you wanted. She had books published, she had tenure, she had a nice husband, children, and an apartment on Central Parkway.
Yes, and real art.
Real art, real art. not those inexpensive prints. Right, right. And somebody you quote somebody in the book as saying, friendship is what you do is you meet and you talk, and you meet and you talk many, many times over the years, and then you share that, and then somebody dies and you share that, and that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds about right when I think about my friendships, although fortunately I have not lost anybody yet.
Well, it's also, just to say, Sheryl, there are no rituals for losing a friend. If you lose a spouse, everyone understands what that means. If you lose a child, which is horrible, everyone knows what that means. But we don't think about losing a friend as a life event.
Right.
But it is.
And it's a great loss, right?
Yes.
Right. The two of you taught feminist criticism together. Your area was French.
Yes.
Her area was English. Now, I took one course, I think. I went to women's college. I took one course, sat on one course on American women's history, but I've never taken a women's studies course, never taken a course in feminist criticism, and I'm not totally sure what it is. What is it?
If you think about Kate Millett, when she called her book Sexual Politics, what she was looking at was the way in which relations between men and women were represented in some of the famous literary texts that we all know, D.H. Lawrence, for example. And she called sexual politics the structure of relationships between men and women. So that was like a first move, and we thought about that as a kind of critique. But we also thought that it wasn't just about the books, but that was in fact an expression of the culture in which these arrangements were power arrangements. And that was the first time people ever really talked about sexual relations as relations of power. That was like one strand. The next thing that happened was, or at the same time really, people began to talk about women writers who had not been paid attention to and given them attention. And we kept moving in that way. So, and then Elaine Showalter, who was a well-known literary critic at the time, created the term gynocritics. You can sort of guess what that would be. And it had to do with thinking about women writers, women critics writing about women writers, and trying to see whether that would produce a different kind of writing. And so that was the earliest stage of what we did in literary criticism. But just getting women into the syllabus was a fight.
Right.
And even in the 1980s, when Columbia decided to admit women, they suddenly looked at their curriculum and said, we don't have any women writers in our humanities course, in our great books course. So that was an early struggle to fight the canon, as we called it.
Right. To get women included,
yes.
To
right.
see how women were treated in literature, I spent a lot of time at Columbia, but not, as a student and, I taught in the journalism school, but I was never in the sort of like dissertation writing, trying to get tenure writing part of Columbia. Sounded like a pretty awful place for women back in the 70s and 80s and maybe even 90s.
For one thing, even though now we're so familiar with thinking about sexual harassment on campus, but there was no conversation, or the word did not function in the 70s of sexual harassment. And male professors, say in the French department, had total freedom to have all kinds of relationships with female students. Many of them were unwanted, and there was no recourse And so there was a combination of seeing only men in charge of the curriculum, but also structuring your exchanges, whether it was in the classroom or in the hallway. And many men were kept on, and they did things that today, put it this way, Joe Biden looks like a saint compared to what we lived with on a regular basis.
Carolyn committed suicide at age 77.
Yes.
What was your reaction to that? Did you feel betrayed? Did you, what?
It was complicated because Carolyn, I took her very seriously all my life, well, all the years of the friendship. She had various views about marriage, about children, about writing, and so on. And so I tended to believe everything she said. But when she said she was going to kill herself, which she said many times in print, I didn't actually believe it. It's very hard to look at someone across the table who looks completely healthy and believe that that person is actually going to kill herself. It's just, you cannot take it in. And so when I was on sabbatical in London, when she killed herself, and so people always think that suicide is a surprise. Well, it was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise. In other words, it was a shock. And of course, I felt, yes, I did feel betrayed, because I thought it's one thing to have a rhetoric about we should control the end of our lives the way we control, like, reproductive rights should also apply to life and death. So it should be okay to kill yourself as a feminist gesture of autonomy. But it really isn't, as it turns out. And so, yes, and I felt angry, and I also felt very sad, because I could not imagine how unhappy she had to have been before she did it. I just can't see. It's called rational suicide, but it doesn't seem rational to me. It seems emotional and really depressed.
Was her husband still alive at the time?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And her kids,
children,
and
right,
her grandkids.
Right.
But she didn't feel, she thought it was very dangerous to get older, and that she didn't want to take the risk of being vulnerable or having to care for somebody vulnerable.
Yeah. And then she felt her career was sort of on a downward slide.
Yes, she felt that her voice, she had had tremendous success with her writing and lectured all over the world. And she felt that feminism no longer mattered in the way it did or had, and that her writing wasn't reaching the people she wanted to reach. And so she felt that it was a kind of intellectual loneliness.
Yeah.
And it's really, well, it's hard to get older and not know where your work is going, if work has been the center of your life.
Right. We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with more with Nancy K. Miller, the author of My Brilliant Friends, Our Lives in Feminism. Tell me about your friendship with Naomi Schor.
Right. Well, that was actually my first feminist friendship. And that might sound strange, but I really think that at that time, it was a moment in which women started to value their friends in a very particular way. And one of the parts that I talk about in the book is the way in which our work, which is to say writing and whatever we did as graduate students, actually she was already an assistant professor, was an integral part of the friendship. And all of the way I've organized the book is in a way under the sign of Virginia Woolf, who in a room of one's own starts to imagine what the novel of the future should look like. And she picks up a book, an imaginary book, that's called Life's Adventure. And she opens it and sees a sentence that says, Chloe liked Olivia. They shared a laboratory. And she goes on to talk about the fact that perhaps their friendship would be long-lasting because they shared the work. And in a way, that was really prophetic, I would say, in terms of how friendships began to evolve with women in the 70s, with that work was part of what we did together. So we might go shopping and go out for lunch or dinner or whatever, but we also shared writing and
how it was going, maybe read each other's work, critiqued it.
Exactly.
Shared your frustrations about your work and what was going on at Columbia.
And our aspirations, which were also being stimulated by the atmosphere of feminism at that time.
Right. Naomi had a long relationship with a married man. It seemed that a number of women in your circle had relationships with married men. What was that about?
Oh dear. Well, this is complicated. I think in that case, you'd have to sort of think about the particular person who will remain nameless, but who was a famous author. And that appealed, that was a kind of erotic magnet for her. And the fact that he was married somehow didn't seem to matter as much as the fact that he was a famous writer, and that by being with him, she was in the world of writers that she found very exciting. And later on, of course, the fact of his being married and having children and having these two establishments became a terrible source of conflict between them until he finally decided to get divorced. But by then she was no longer in love with him. So it was really a really sad story in the way, but she did choose it.
But you also kicked over a nice guy for a not so nice married guy. And was this part of
It's all tied up with work. Was
this part of the great man, the important man syndrome?
Yes, it was partly that it was sort of borrowing the aura of their power, and they were also kind of mentors.
Yeah.
In the sense that they also read our writing, they introduced us to a style of academic thinking that we're only beginning to understand. And there was also, don't forget, we're still in the aftermath of the 60s, which really went into the early 70s, in which for women, and I certainly took this extremely seriously, sexual freedom seemed a form of agency. And especially for those of us who've been brought up in the 50s, it felt like liberation, even though, as of course we understood rapidly, it was of course not liberation at all. But there was a moment in which it seemed that that was very exciting and that we were free.
Okay. You formed like many women, a women's support group. I remember belonging to a women's support group that met up near Columbia and on Riverside Drive, which I think yours did too.
Yes.
And one thing I remember is that, the women in my group, and I think I was the youngest, and we mostly divorced women. I think there was a widowed woman, and everybody's gung-ho, and we're not gonna be kicked around anymore, and we're gonna take on our own lives. But it seemed to me that the more that I listened to the women in the group, what they were really angry about was that now that they were divorced or widowed, they had to work. They didn't have anybody, they had to work and pay for their own retirement and support their own children. And it seemed that a number of them, what they really wanted was to find another husband who would take care of them. That wasn't true in my case, but that's what I got from my support group.
We were in a different universe because I don't think anyone was married, or maybe there were a couple of people who were married, but we really wanted to be in the world. And that was the question. And one of the main foils were our mothers, because we felt that our mothers hadn't had full lives, and we wanted to.
Yeah.
And so, and work, we were really kind of obsessed by work and the possibility of career. that we saw on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. What made Naomi special to you?
She was very beautiful and sophisticated and stylish. And we had this French connection because we were both involved in French culture. We, in fact, had overlapped in Paris in the 60s, but we hadn't gotten to know each other. So we shared an intensity about this literature that we took very seriously. So it was a bond of, we had a sense of kinship that was involved with books, but also matters of style.
Mm-hmm.
And we both immediately just felt that we had found our match on some level.
We don't have much time to talk about Diane, but tell me about Diane. Who was your late life friend?
Yes.
What was it that was special about her?
Well, she was an extraordinary woman. When I met her, we were both around 60, and she was already very accomplished. She had written a controversial and really important biography of Anne Sexton that had gotten her a lot of attention. And so when I met her, she was already very involved in creating new kinds of biography, mainly about women, in fact, practically always. And I saw someone who had found her way and enjoyed her life in the world, and also was interested. That was a kind of reenactment of the relationship with Naomi, of trading work, but also having social interactions. She created a salon for women writers. It wasn't a women's group in the old ways, but it also had that sense of being part of something larger.
And she was had a lot of optimism, even though she was, shortly after you met her, she was diagnosed with cancer, but she continued writing. She was going to finish her big book. She continued to entertain.
She was extraordinary in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I greatly admired her. And then when she became ill, it was actually the first time I had lived with a friend's illness, in the sense that I think I'm teaching a course now about life writing and illness. And I realize how significant a part it is of life. At the same time, we tend to not understand it as part of life. We kind of sort of shunt it off on the side as an accident. But in a way, watching someone go through a severe illness created, of course, a form of intimacy, but also it led to a kind of philosophical moment of thinking about what matters in a life and how you live your life when you don't have that much time to live.
Right. It's difficult, everybody acknowledges, it's difficult to make good friends later in life.
Yes.
And if you have lost some of your most significant friends, and it's difficult, and you're late in life and it's hard to make more significant friends, what do you do?
I have only 2 friends who are older than I am. They're both great, but most of my new friendships are with younger women, some partly from the teaching situation, but not only. And that's a whole other, and I find myself in the role that Carolyn had, sort of the mentor role,
Mm-hmm.
but I really would rather be the friend than the mentor, because I don't really feel that I'm all that wise. But it is another way of being friends, but I really miss that sense of the friend with whom you are in sync in your life experience and in your moment of being.
So I guess one of the messages is start cultivating younger friends.
Yeah, well, kind of.
What do you want readers to take from this book?
I'd like them to I feel that my readership is primarily women, although not uniquely, and to really think about friendship as something important in one's life, not an add-on, something essential. Because we tend to think, oh, well, like with Freud, love and work. Okay, so let's say you have a partner and you're a job, let's say, to be crude. But then what about all of this other emotional interaction? And that, to me, is a vital part of life. And so I think it's important to think about it and think, and to, I would use the word invest, although that seems sort of vulgar, but to really understand that these friendships are a crucial part of your life and as important as your marriage or your partnership or
At
your
a time
work.
when a lot of people live far distances from family, and you tend to lose family members over the time, at least your parents, that friends are really family. They become your family.
Well, they are your, well, they're your world. I think, yeah, so that's really what that's
Okay.
really my
Very
main hope.
interesting book.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting book. And I want to thank you. We're out of time. I'm thanking Nancy Miller for joining me today. Her new book, My Brilliant Friends, Our Lives in Feminism, part of the Gender and Culture series of Columbia University Press, can be found online and in bookstores. For One to One and the City University of New York, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.